Welcome to Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music production, and the music business. My guest this week is custom music producer Kyle Hunter. But first of all, there's a new Grammy rulebook. The Recording Academy came out with 66 pages of new rules that are mostly refining the categories. This is a long time in coming because a lot of the things that happened in the past were not very well defined, and as a result, you had some things that happened in certain categories that no one was pleased with. This might be a little different, though, this time. First of all, the album has been defined. Surprisingly enough, no one ever knew for sure what an album was. Now there's a real definition. It's defined as having at least 5 tracks, and they have to be completely different songs, not different mixes. And they have to have a playing time of at least 15 minutes. Now, you might think, oh, wait a second, that's pretty easy. Well, not in this day and age, because songs are really short, and that's illustrated best by Lil Nas X last year. He was a nominee for Album of the Year with his EP7, and he just barely qualified under the rules this year because it has 8 tracks, and it runs about 18 minutes long. 8 tracks in 18 minutes, so you can see how short songs are these days. There's a lot more, though. For Best New Artist, now it says that voters have to focus on performances and not songwriting or production, and a lot of times this gets blurred. So now they're trying to unblur it a little bit, clear it up, and make it a little bit more fair, I think. Another thing they did was better define country and gospel and contemporary Christian categories. Basically what they said was, if it's country, it has to sound like country, and if it's gospel and contemporary Christian, it has to talk about God. Otherwise, it doesn't fit. So that certainly makes sense. Here's something that I thought made a lot of sense. It said, in the Best Musical Theater Album category, you have to listen to the album and don't vote for the show. That's so easy to do. Sometimes you can go see a show and be blown away by it, where that becomes primary and the music is a secondary feel. So hopefully people will divorce the show itself from the actual music in the future here. Another thing that was well defined is the manners of everybody, both on committees, which sometimes can get really heated, and you can find some very unpleasant exchanges. Well, not anymore. If that happens, you can be cut out for good and never be on another committee. For some people, actually, that's a blessing, having served on several committees in the past myself. But it also talks about artists trash-talking other nominees. So, in fact, you can be dropped from your category if you do that. I think that's kind of extreme. It would take a lot for them to do that, but at least now it's in the rule book. The other thing is they're trying to get categories that really mean something. If it doesn't have a lot of entries, then there's now alternatives. So for instance, if there's not at least 40 distinct artist entries in the category, then the number of nominations is going to change from 5 to 3. And if it drops below 25, the category immediately goes into hiatus for the next year and there's no award given. To make matters worse, if it drops below 25 entries for 3 consecutive years, the category is discontinued. And then they're making it really hard to put new categories in because now you have to have at least 2/3 supermajority vote, both on the awards nominations committee and the board of trustees, in order to become an official category. So you can see that they're tightening things up. All I can say is it's about time. These things needed to be defined, and especially as music changes, we need to define things a lot better in situations like this so there's fewer hurt feelings in the long run. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@BobbyOInnerCircle.com. You can also sign up for my free vocal mixing techniques mini course at BobbyOwsinskiCourses.com and download free ebooks and PDF downloads on mixing, production, mastering, and social media at BobbyOwsinski.com/free-resources. Now, artists and bands have been hit pretty hard by not having a venue to play at, but orchestras too. But now they're attempting to make a comeback just as music venues are as well. The only problem is, how do you get 100 musicians safely on stage? Well, this is especially important because it was found that just one person at a choir practice infected 52 other people. And they're not sure if it's a result of spit while singing or breath or forced air from lungs, just not sure. So, when you get a lot of people in a small space at the same time, of course, everybody gets concerned. And especially when musicians are blowing through wind instruments. So what happens with the tuba or an oboe, for instance? Well, it turns out there was a study in Germany where they used a smoke-filled room with players doing their thing in order to find out what happens. And interestingly enough, they found out that there was very little air disturbance around wind instruments. They weren't launching droplets, and what they found was, as basic physics would tell you, that the air coming out the bell of an instrument is moving a lot more slowly than when it went in the mouthpiece. So what they ended up determining was that there has to be at least 6 feet in between players. Well, that's social distancing, and it's pretty much what we're doing everywhere. But they're also putting up plexiglass shields in between sections, so that's pretty new. What do you think the worst instrument is for all of this? Well, the flute, believe it or not. It found out that there was more aerosols, more droplets coming out of that instrument than anything else. Still, what orchestras are going to do is have a lot fewer people on stage. They're thinking about 55. And what they'll also do is, just like with athletes, they're going to test them before rehearsals and concerts just to make sure that everybody's safe. My guest this week is Kyle Hunter, who started producing music for artists, but soon learned about the world of sync licensing and custom music. He also co-founded RhythmCouture, which now counts Forever 21, Vans, Calvin Klein, the New York Times, and many more major brands among their clients. The company also has a large music library representing a wide range of genres and styles, featuring affordable prices for content creators in almost any situation. During the interview, we talked about making the transition from producing artists to custom production, balancing between being creative and overseeing a business, dealing with fast turnaround times, the latest music trends, and much more. I spoke with Kyle via Zoom from his home in New York City. Tell me how you get into music.
All right. Well, it's interesting because I come from like a musical family. My dad, he was a jazz musician. So he played in a lot of different bands and things like that, So I kind of early on, I got adjusted to music. And then my mom, on the flip side, she was more so into like gospel music. So, I had jazz and gospel, both worlds. So I would listen to a lot of different music in the house. And started doing like a lot of just poetry in the beginning. And then that kind of led to doing hip hop. I grew up in Queens, New York. So for me, I saw a lot of different Queens musicians from LL Cool J, Run DMC. It's just so much talent out here. So you really couldn't go far without seeing somebody famous. So, just culturally, it was a big thing out in Queens. So, I just grew up just doing music. Eventually I started doing like a lot of mixtapes locally. And what I did was I would sell a lot of those mixtapes out of the trunk of my car, just kind of going from shop to shop, borough to borough, Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and just generating a lot of buzz locally. And then what happened was a local DJ actually started spinning my music for a lot of different industry people. And from that point, I really started doing a lot of just production for different musicians, a lot of ghostwriting. And a lot of those records got shopped to like major labels for major artists. And, subsequently, I started working with like a lot of big people, like Kanye West artist Kid Cudi, Nick Cannon. I did some work with him, just a lot of different people in the industry, and started making a lot of just legway in terms of just getting my name out there, the notoriety and things like that. And from that point, things just really just came together, musically. Like it kind of like just Tetris, all the pieces kind of fall in the right place, So that's really how I got started, in a nutshell.
But then producing for artists is different than what you're doing now.
Yeah. Yes. It's a big stretch. So how I made the transition from being a music producer to actually where I'm at now is very interesting. I did a lot of tracks for a lot of different people. And I was approached by a person in the music industry by the name of Sarah Hunt. And Sarah was like, she's a really good person. She was big into music licensing and things like that. And she still is today. And she basically told me, she said, hey, I like your music, but I would like to pitch your music for television and film. And this is like, I want to say like 2010. So this is about a decade ago. And at the time, I wasn't too familiar with that. It was something that was very foreign to me. And I'm like, what is that? Like, I'm thinking about record sales and going gold and charting and all that stuff. And she's like, well, it's an outlet that a lot of people, they really don't do. But she was like, the people that do it, they do very well for themselves. So I said, all right, so I was dealing with her. Then I was also dealing with another agent. And I'll never forget the day the other agent had called me and said, hey, I got some money for you. And I'm like, well, okay, and then it was $5,000. And I said, wow, I said, what is this for? Like, this is so foreign to me, and he's like, oh, this is one of your songs got, pitched for a commercial and got the placement. I said, wow, so this is like really a thing, like I can actually, sustain a living actually from getting sync placements and getting my music placed. So from that point, that's when I started realizing that there were so many other opportunities available. And that's when I started really getting into more syncs. I got over like 500 placements,
Wow.
dealing with different companies, product placements, advertisements. And I just continued on that path. And then eventually it just became like a natural progression for me, because a lot of people that would hear my music, naturally, they would reach out to me. So they would say, hey, I heard your music in this TV show, or I heard it in this commercial. I want to lease something from you, or I want a custom song. So I said, all right, so I started doing custom production for a lot of these different companies. And it really just progressed to the point where I said, well, you know what? I might as well actually have my own company and actually just take it to the next level, because I'm doing so much and I have so many talented producers that I deal with and that I work with. It just became a natural progression, so that's how I actually founded RhythmCouture. And I started with my business partner, Robert, and we pretty much just made it a focal point to actually just cultivate a company that's very artist friendly and artist driven at the same time. So, I think that's really a big difference from what we do. It's like, we are musicians. So even though you have a lot of companies, they got, millions of dollars invested into them and all these venture capitalists and stuff like that, we are really just a independent company that's really thriving. So, that's pretty much how I got started where I'm at today,
How much actual production do you do anymore? Because you said you had a lot of artists and producers that work with you, and I looked at your roster, and you do. So much of that has to do with administration of what they're doing, kind of looking over what they're doing, and that takes away from time being creative. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is challenging, because when you are a musician, you're naturally creative. So, you love to create. That's my passion. I love to write, I love to produce. But to your point, being a CEO of a company, it requires a lot on the business end. So the dynamic where I used to be able to just say, hey, I'm gonna record 5 songs today, those days are gone. It's like,
Yeah.
I can't, because it's like everything is time management. So I have to run a company, and I actually have to also manage my artists. So I got to make sure that certain deadlines are met. If a company says, hey, we want a commercial and we need it with a quick turnaround, well, I got to make sure that gets done, So it is challenging, but what I do a lot nowadays is time management. So I really find myself saying, all right, if I have to do these things during the course of the week, let me try to just cut out, even if it's like, for 4 hours on a day, I can just be creative and kind of just get the creative juices flowing, because, I do a lot of writing too. So whether it be for singers or whatever, songs for them to have, and we could pitch those songs too. So I think it's important, you got to have that balance. Like, it can't be work all the time, because you just get burnt out. And, you get to that point where it could become a drag. So, I think for our sanity, it's important,
Yeah, time management is a really difficult skill to get your arms around for a lot of people anyway. It seems like you've managed to do it. But what I've found is there are some people that just cannot grasp the concept of time management. And they get pulled one way and they do something until they get pulled another way, even though they'll have a list of things to do. I have one very good friend in particular that's like that just cannot get his arms around it. But I've always found the same thing as you. I have to do this, 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 and this, and I'm going to find a way to do all these things today. And then still have some time, for myself to do whatever. So congratulations for learning that. Not many people do.
Thank you, man. Hey, it's like you learn by fire. You got you got to get in there and get burned. I'm like, all right, this has to work. I got to figure out a way to put all these pieces together.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You mentioned a quick turnaround. What is a quick turnaround?
Well, it depends. Like some companies, they'll say, all right, we want you to score a soundtrack for this movie. And normally with movies, you have a bit more time, because they already got the scripts and everything like that. They tell you what they want for certain scenes, for certain characters. And we got more time. But sometimes, like when we're dealing with like ad campaigns and things like that, they can be on really tight time frames, and they say, hey, I need this like yesterday. So at that point, we got to get everybody together, all the musicians that we feel would fit that project, and say, all right, well, this is what they want. This is the sound that they're going for. We need you guys to create this, and we need a quick turnaround. So I think the best thing about our company is that we don't have like thousands of artists. Like we really have like a roster of 25 artists right now, and everybody does what they do very well. So if we need a guitar player, then I'll reach out to one of our artists named Medic, or if we need a certain sound that's, it could be like a folk singer, then we got Amelia Wilcox, a talented musician from Vermont. So we have different people that specialize in different things, and that helps with the quick turnaround. So, it could be like within maybe like 2 days, we could crank out a song and have it ready to go.
When you get asked to do a custom song, do they ask you to pitch it? And are you in competition with a bunch of other people doing the same thing? Or when they ask you, that's just, okay, they're going to use it. They're going to use what I give them.
You know what? When they want, like, let's say like a company will come to us and say, hey, we need a custom song for our company. They're normally coming to us because they know that they're going to get the product that they need because they've heard a similar sound. So they normally gauge it by something they've heard on our website and say, hey, I like this song. Could you make me a song similar to this? So they already tailor it to us. The situations where they're broader are normally like, let's say it could be like for, a movie, and you've got all these different sync licensing companies competing for the same soundtrack. So they'll say, hey, I want this action-packed song that's just bigger than life. And, meanwhile, they're reaching out to like 10 other companies. So the quick turnaround is important because, at least you can be competitive and still be relevant. Because, if you're taking 5 months to get a song, they're like, it's just not going to work. So, yeah, those situations can be a bit more competitive, and in those situations, we normally, if they ask for like 2 songs, we'll normally give them like 6, just to have extra options in that case.
Are there any trends in what you're being asked for?
Yeah. I find that everything goes in waves, so I think now the wave is that in terms of like, there's a lot of people that they ask for hip hop tracks, but the trend right now is music that I would say is not very content driven. It's more so about the production value. So there's a lot of, they call it quote unquote mumble rap, for lack of better words, people not making sense. They're just, humming, not nouns and verbs together properly. But this is what the trend is, and this is what a lot of people want. So, I mean, we try to hold ourselves to a certain standard musically. So even though that's what they want, like we'll still have our musicians make sense of that. So it's like, all right, even though they might want a quote unquote mumble rap song, let's still try to infuse that with some type of artistic integrity. So, even the production value might be similar to that. The content is still there, so people can still appreciate it and say, all right, this is something that I can actually make sense of.
When I looked at your website, what struck me right away was these guys are doing something that's very creative, that's not cookie cutter. It's just, as you say, you're trying to infuse your artistry into what they're asking for. And it really came across in your website. So congratulations for that, because I got the feeling immediately there's something else going on behind the scenes here.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. And that's what we're all about, like artistic integrity. And, and that goes with the music, but then even on the business side too, like how we deal with our musicians, how we engage them in terms of just making sure they understand the business side too, because a lot of times, artists will deal with companies, but they really won't understand how the mechanics of the business works. So it's a holistic approach, and it's really like a family environment. Like, we're just really passionate from start to finish to make sure everything crosses the finish line successfully.
I was really surprised when I looked at your prices. They're very inexpensive, but they're also segmented, and it's the right price for the right audience, it seemed, the right client.
Absolutely.
So how'd you come up with that? That's a tough one.
Yeah, you know what? I think that there was a time where, in terms of just like music licensing, that the major record labels really dominated. So it was like, if you wanted custom music, if you wanted something that was of large production value for, let's say, your big motion picture, you would go to the major record labels because that's just what it was. So, we really made it a point to say, well, what we want to do, we want to be accessible too, because even though we deal with like big companies that have big budgets that they give us, I didn't want us to outclass the everyday working person, that has a 9 to 5 and they're passionate about what they do and they're a filmmaker. They don't have a large budget, but they still want quality music. So I think that was important for us to make sure that we're accessible to those people too, because ultimately we want to see people win, and when those people win, we win too, because, today's nobody is tomorrow's somebody. That's what I always say. So, all it takes is that right opportunity, and they'll look back and they'll say, hey, you know what? I got a great track from RhythmCouture. The production value was amazing. And, those relationships, they take you across the finish line even further, so that's important, being accessible, not being too Hollywood with the prices, and, just meeting people where they're at.
Again, very affordable for just about anybody, especially at the inexpensive prices going for the average person, the average content creator. Are those songs or pieces coming from your library, or are they custom?
Yeah, so those songs, like let's say that someone wants a unlimited yearly subscription. So for unlimited yearly subscription, it's $150. A person can download as much content as they want, but that's not custom music.
Yeah.
So those are songs that are already in the library and people have access to that. Now, for the bigger production houses that, let's say that they want music that's custom, well, yeah, those prices, those budgets are much bigger that we deal with. So we make sure we tailor everything for the right demographic, but at the same time, we're accessible. So even if, let's say, a person doesn't have a major budget, but they do want a custom song, well, then we have a department that contacts them and says, okay, well, tell us your budget. What are you working with? And we can try to work with you to give you something that can meet your budget.
I saw that you have 2 studios, one in New York and one in Vermont.
Yeah.
I know you're based in New York. The Vermont one was kind of a head scratcher. So what's up with that?
Well, it's funny. It's funny. My business partner, Robert, he's in Vermont.
Ah, okay.
So, right. So, so he owns that studio location out there. And, we got a lot of talented musicians out there in Vermont too. So, I mean, globally, we got guys all over the world, but we got quite a few people in Vermont too. So, yeah, we have dual locations,
Okay, got it. Are most of your clients U.S. based?
You know what? It's actually international. We get people all over. I mean, it's amazing how just global we have become. And it's just from all over. I've had people in Germany. I could have people reach out that are over in Paris that need custom music. So I just think that it's a dual thing that we got going on in terms of word of mouth, but then also just the work speaking for itself. Like so many people have come to us and say, "Hey, I heard your music and this Ralph Lauren ad," or K Sparks, "I heard your song Empower on TV and I love your music." Like, so it's a global thing. Like we get clientele from all over the world. And I'm just grateful for that because that just speaks volume to the work ethic, and the quality of the music that we put out.
I've talked to a number of publishers recently that were telling me that the sync business has really gotten killed with the coronavirus that we're going through now. Have you found in your business that you've been hurt by this? Has it been a price thing, or is it because advertising has really decreased and prices for ads have decreased? So I would imagine it affected you as well.
Yeah, well, how it affected us is really the physicality of it. So, meaning that with this coronavirus, all the social distancing, and being that I'm based in New York, you can't interact physically with people, and our business is really, it's digital, but it's also physical because you got to get out there, you got to meet people, you got to network. And sometimes, some people just don't want to communicate strictly via email. Sometimes people want to sit down and, they want to be able to look you in the eye and see that you're a person of character and have substance, and be able to actually seal the deal in person. So being that we can no longer physically get out there, it has impacted everyone in that regard. But in terms of the digital base of our business, that's actually still doing well, because people are home, obviously, people are creating and they need content for whether it be for YouTube or whatever projects they're working on. So people are making purchases, so we're doing well, considering.
Yeah. Did you say that the company's been going for 10 years?
I've been doing sync for 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been doing sync for 10 years. But yeah, me and Robert incorporated actually not too long ago. Like it hasn't been very that long, but things have taken off so fast for us and the growth has just been exponential. So, it's great.
Let's just go to syncs here. When you're in the sync world, what was the biggest mistake you made?
You asked some really great questions, man.
That's my job.
Yeah, man, you good, man. All right. So I would say this. I think when I first got started, the mistake that I made a lot of times that they often do is when you're a musician, sync companies will present you with a non-exclusive agreement. And if you're not careful with the terms might not be exactly ideal. Now, what I mean with that is that a lot of sync companies will say, "All right, let's discuss publishing." And they'll say to you, "Well, you keep 100% of your writer's share of your publishing, but we're going to take 100% of the publishing." And that was a mistake that I made in the beginning that I had to learn, because the reality, is that at the end of the day, publishing is your lifeline.
Yeah.
Like that's your retirement plan right there. You should never let anyone take your publishing from you, because that's the thing that 20 years from now, you still got income coming in from that publishing. So why would you sign that away? And, some sync companies do that. They'll say, "Hey, we need to take this publishing for you." And I don't agree with that. I feel that in regards to publishing, that the artist is just as important as the business. So yeah, granted, you might pitch a song for an artist and you might get them in the Super Bowl commercial, and that's great. But does that really mean you should rob them of all of their publishing? Is that really ethical? It's business, but when we're talking about ethics and actually just treating people like you want to be treated, is that fair? So, what we really do is like, we do the opposite. Like, we don't strip artists of all their publishing. We split it. So we'll say, hey, this is fair because it's a 50-50 arrangement. Granted, we're working the music, but we do respect the music that you're bringing to the table. So we're not going to strip you of your publishing. So, and that's only for that sync placement. So, they retain 100% of publishing, whatever else they do on their own. But for the placement, we do split it 50-50 with them.
You mentioned before about how you had the woman, Sarah was her name, and she came to you and you weren't aware of the sync world at the time.
Right.
Would you consider that your big break, or was there another one that happened where all of a sudden you went, okay, yeah, now this is kind of happening. I get this now.
Yeah, well, it was two things. So when Sarah first approached me, I didn't know at the time, but that was actually life-changing because after she reached out to me, that set off all these chains of events that really started to push me into the sync direction. Because prior to that, all I knew was album sales, ghostwriting and producing for artists. And this is how you're supposed to make a living as a musician. I wasn't exposed to this other world. So once she pulled back the curtain, I'm like, wow, this was like a big changer, And then the second thing was she actually got one of my songs placed in a Monster Energy ad campaign.
Wow.
And that took off. And I started noticing like my social media really started blowing up, and all these followers that drink Monster Energy. And I'm like, who are these people? She's like, oh, we got you in Monster Energy. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, this is pretty cool. So yeah, those moments I look back on, I say, wow, everything happens for a reason. And even though you can't really pinpoint it at the moment, when you look back, you say, wow, all these things happen so that I could be in the position that I am today. So yeah, I'm appreciative.
Yeah, it's funny how those things happen. As you say, you don't realize it at the time, usually, that it might be something that's life-changing. You're just kind of going with the flow at the moment.
And it's crazy. Sometimes I said, wow, man, I said, what would have happened if I never responded to her? Because, I used to get so many emails and, everybody's claiming they're going to do this and do that. And I'm pretty sure the same with you, it's happened. You get emails from people and you're like, here we go again, but unfortunately that time I didn't say that, and, everything worked out the way it did.
Sometimes it works out for the better. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Before coronavirus, what was changing in the business? Was there a big change that you saw happening from the time you got in to now?
Yeah. So, basically, I think that there's a lot of companies that are changing the dynamics of the business. I feel like Artlist is one of those companies that shook things up a bit because of their business model. You basically have people that are able to get subscriptions and they get unlimited music. But in addition to the unlimited music, they have a broader range with that music as well. So, if you pay the $199 subscription, you could do a lot of different things with that music. And sync companies, we're like on the other side of that, because even though we do subscriptions, there are limitations. So, for like our unlimited subscription for $150, you can't pay that and then use some of that music in a big motion picture.
Sure.
Where you got like a $30 million budget. Like, we have to negotiate proper terms, So I think that really shifted a lot of things, because then there was like this divide. It was like, all right, the sync companies are like, no, it's not cool, and Artlist is like, well, this is how we do business. So it's, it's like things kind of disruptive in a way,
Yeah, got it. Last question, Kyle. And thanks for your time. I'm so glad we did this. Thank you for reaching out.
No, absolutely. I appreciate you having me and, taking time. I'm a fan of your work, man.
Oh, thank you, man. What is the best piece of business advice that you either learned along the way or maybe somebody imparted to you?
Wow. Okay. So this is the best. Well, I'm going to give two. All right. Yeah. The first one is, don't get burned trying to keep other people warm. Right.
I love it.
Like, because people will use you, and it can be emotionally and it can be mentally draining. And, sometimes when you're just a naturally good spirited person, you want to help people, especially people that are in your inner circle. whether it be family or friends. But if you don't learn how to compartmentalize those relationships, they can really run you down sometimes, so you got to learn, like, hey, if this person is calling you and every time they call, they're asking for money, or if it's not money, then, they're emotionally draining and always talking about all things that are bad and nothing's ever positive. You got to say, all right, time out. I can only talk to you maybe 5 minutes out the day, because I can't do this.
Yeah.
And I would say the second thing is persistence wears down resistance. So, no matter what you want to do in life, you're going to hear no a lot of times, but you can't let the no be the definitive. So you have to always continue to just pursue what it is that you want to do and do it. Just go out and do it. You'll knock on a lot of doors, some won't open and some will. So in life, that's what life is about. I think a lot of times people, especially on social media nowadays, they post a lot of the glamorous things, so everybody posts all the great stuff. But, like I say, nobody's posting their losses, though.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, you see the cars and you see the houses, but you don't see, the times that they didn't succeed, So at the end of the day, like, don't get deterred, by anything like that. Just keep going, be persistent, be consistent, and be good at what you do, and good will come back to you.
You can find out more about Kyle and his company at RhythmCouture.com. That's RhythmCouture, RhythmCouture, all one word, RhythmCouture.com. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@BobbyOInnerCircle.com. To listen to other episodes of Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle, go to BobbyOwsinski.com, select the podcast tab, or go to BobbyOInnerCircle.com, or you can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Mixcloud, Google Play, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, TuneIn Radio, Radio Public, and Podbean. At BobbyOwsinski.com and BobbyOInnerCircle.com, you'll also find a sign-up form for my newsletter and for alerts for new podcasts. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.